we get to be back in a place we wish we hadn't left in 1996. With this background, the best way for our fans here in Winnipeg to celebrate the opportunity is to buy season tickets. Selling season tickets, selling 13,000 season tickets, is the best message to send to the NHL Board of Governors before they meet on June 21st. And to be candid, this isn't going to work very well unless this building is sold out every night.
Some blunt talk from NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman. Needs for the building to be sold out every night, stressing the importance of fan support for Winnipeg's new hockey team. Will they get the support? Our guest says yes. Tony Keller, author of New Economics of the NHL, Why Canada Can Support Not Just 7, but 12 NHL teams. He's also executive fellow at the University of Toronto's Mowat Center. Tony, thank you so much for doing this.
Very good to be here.
Look, I'm loving your arithmetic, not just because I'm a Patriot and a hockey fan, but take me down that road. Everyone's just bubbling up with joy because today we go to 7 teams in Canada, and you're saying 7. We should strive for a little higher. We should go for a dozen. How does that work?
Yeah, well, there's several other Canadian markets that are very strong hockey markets. In fact, they're stronger than Winnipeg. The most important of these is Southern Ontario. Southern Ontario is a huge market. The Golden Horseshoe has 9 million people. It only has one NHL team, and that's the Toronto Maple Leafs. They make far more money than any other team in the NHL because they have a gigantic captive market. And to a lesser extent, the same applies in both Montreal and Vancouver. In addition to that, Quebec City is about the same size as Winnipeg, could also support a team. And we looked at a couple of other cities, by the way. We looked at Halifax and Saskatoon. We really think that they're too small to support an NHL team. But 12 teams in Canada, certainly possible.
All right, Quebec, as far as most people are concerned, no-brainer. That's a function of time. We've heard lots about Quebec. They're going to get a new arena, and they are certainly ready for the National Hockey League. And, of course, they've been in the bigs before. So that one's easy. When you talk about Southern Ontario, just 9 million people in the Golden Horseshoe between, I guess you're counting between Oshawa and Niagara Falls. What specific areas? Are you talking about North York? Are you talking about Hamilton? Are you talking about Kitchener-Waterloo? Tell us what you're talking about.
The best place to put a team would actually be Toronto itself. Depends how that could work out, but one very logical way for that to happen would be if Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment were allowed to own a second team, or if a team were allowed to come into the market and they did a deal with MLSE to share the Air Canada Centre, because that would defray the costs. Hamilton would be an excellent site. And some other site in Southern Ontario would be good if Hamilton were not available, such as Kitchener, Waterloo, or even London. But yeah, when I looked at it, it seemed that Toronto was the most logical place for a second team, and somewhere else in Southern Ontario for a third team.
You're suggesting 3 teams for Southern Ontario.
That's right.
Did I hear you correct? You were talking about Montreal. Are you suggesting that Montreal ought to have a second team as well?
Absolutely, it could. Montreal right now is the second or third highest revenue earner in the NHL. Again, exceptionally profitable team. I mean, the truth about Winnipeg, no one really wants to hear this today, and it's kind of raining on the parade to say it, but Winnipeg is not the best market in Canada for a new hockey team. In fact, of the major markets, it's one of the weakest. However, here's where Winnipeg wins. Compared to the markets in the southern United States, Winnipeg will be a very successful market. So if Jim Balzilli or any of these other potential owners were allowed to move a team wherever they wanted to, they would move that team to Southern Ontario. The league won't let them do that. The Leafs won't let them do that. The Buffalo Sabres won't let them do that. So Winnipeg is one of the options. In fact, at the moment, the only option that is available. But it's a much better option than really any city in the southern United States. They will make money in Winnipeg, whereas that team was losing money in Atlanta.
Everyone will grant you that Winnipeg doesn't have the population base of the Golden Horseshoe. We understand that. We understand the math. But do you have any doubt, based on the new math of the National Hockey League, the new math of the dollar, the new math of Western Canada vis-a-vis North America and the rest of the world, do you have any doubt that Winnipeg has a very, very bright future as an NHL market?
Again, I feel like I'm raining on the parade here. I would say Winnipeg has a good future. Exceptionally bright. That will depend on a few things. It will depend on the Canadian dollar. As you say, if the Canadian dollar goes down, if the Canadian economy becomes much weaker, that will have an impact on that team. But what's important to remember is if the NHL is going to have 30 teams, it's going to have more of those teams in Canada, or it's going to have to extract a lot more money out of either taxpayers in the United States to support teams in the US, or out of the successful NHL teams in Canada to subsidize US teams. Winnipeg will be a middle-of-the-pack team. Despite being the smallest market in the NHL, it will be a middle-of-the-pack team. But Winnipeg can never make as much money as the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Vancouver Canucks or the Montreal Canadiens. It really just can't because of the size of the market.
Now, what about the new economics of the NHL itself? I know that some of this gets into almost policy wonk territory, but the National Hockey League made some changes in the last few years, and I think they're giving currency to your argument.
Yeah, well, look, the NHL is in a very unusual situation. The NHL wants to keep teams in the United States. It does not want to return teams to Canada. If Gary Bettman could have prevented it, he would not have allowed a team to move to Winnipeg. But the problem is that there are several teams in the United States that are losing money. They're losing money hand over fist, and their owners are not very interested in continuing down that path. And the options that they're left with are fairly limited. One of the options would be much more revenue transfer from the wealthy, successful Canadian teams to those money-losing American teams. That's probably not going to happen. Another option is extract a lot more money out of your local taxpayers. And several teams, such as the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Phoenix Coyotes, are going back to governments and saying, give us more money. But if neither of those happen, then the next logical option is move a team to a place where there are fans. And that's Canada.
What about the new agreement, the new collective bargaining agreement that the NHL did recently? Is that not making life easier for people who have their act together as the ownership group does in Winnipeg?
Well, the collective bargaining agreement is another big surprise. So this was supposed to save small market teams. It was supposed to help small market teams. What's actually happened is it's been great for Canadian teams because the Canadian dollar is going up and the Canadian economy is strong. It has been terrible for American teams because Canadian teams have basically pay the same amount in salaries as they did 6 years ago because the Canadian dollar has gone up so much. Whereas for American teams, they've had to increase their payrolls by about 50%. Canadian teams see their revenues go up and their payrolls remain stable. They become more profitable. American teams, particularly some of the small, less successful U.S. teams like the Thrashers, they're in a situation where their revenues are not really rising, but they keep having to pay more and more each year for players. Another thing that's probably going to happen, and this will terrify hockey fans to hear this, but a year from now, the collective bargaining agreement is up. The NHL and the players will have to renegotiate that collective bargaining agreement, and it is entirely possible, and I would say even likely, that the NHL will ask the players for very big concessions, which means we could be losing a whole other season all over again in 2012-13 as the NHL tries to get more money out of the players to try to save some of those struggling U.S. teams.
Tony Keller, thank you so much for imparting a heck of a lot of knowledge into just a very, very few minutes. That was great compression. Thank you so much, Tony.
Pleasure being with you.
Appreciate it. Tony Keller is the author of New Economics of the NHL, Why Canada Can Support Not 7, but 12 Teams.